Have you ever wondered why the kinder you are, the heavier your heart feels? You keep giving, keep smiling, keep saying yes, yet deep down you're drained, unseen, almost invisible. It's like pouring water into every thirsty cup while your own well runs dry. Psychologists call this people-pleasing, a survival pattern where kindness is used to win safety and love. People call you generous, patient, dependable, but inside you know the cost. This is the danger of being too kind. When your goodness becomes a mask, when your yes is no longer freedom but survival. And to understand how this mask was born, we must look back, far back, to where it first took root. You're always smiling, always helping, always saying yes. People admire you, call you reliable, the glue that holds everything together. They see the patience, the strength, the endless giving, but rarely do they see the cost. Inside, there is a weight that no one names, a heaviness behind the smile, a hollowness inside every yes, a tremor behind the helping hand. At night, you lie awake, not because you want to, but because your mind replays every promise, every favor, every unspoken expectation. It is as if your body has forgotten how to rest, as if even silence itself carries a demand. This is not weakness, it is survival. Psychologists call it compassion fatigue, a state where kindness is no longer abundance but depletion. Think of a candle burning at both ends. The flame shines brighter for a moment, but the wax disappears twice as fast. That is what relentless kindness becomes, a slow burning down of the self, exhaustion carefully wrapped in politeness. And here lies the paradox. The world applauds you for being dependable, yet the more you give, the less visible you feel. The more you carry, the less others notice your weight. Like glass, you are transparent, holding everything in place but invisible, until the cracks appear. You may ask yourself when kindness, once light and free, turned into obligation and exhaustion. When yes became automatic and no felt like betrayal. The answer does not begin here in adulthood, but much earlier, long before deadlines and relationships, before jobs and responsibilities. This pattern was etched into you. To understand it, we must turn back the clock, not to the applause of colleagues or the expectations of friends, but to childhood itself, to the moments when love felt conditional, when approval was tied to obedience, when silence felt safer than need. That is where the shadow of kindness first took root. And so, to move forward, we must first look back, because the story of your exhaustion is not simply about today. It is about the child you once were, the one who learnt to trade honesty for harmony, truth for survival, self for acceptance. And that child story is where our journey continues. Picture a child in the classroom, finishing their work quickly, not because they want to shine, but because they want to help others. When the teacher asks for volunteers, their hand always goes up first. When classmates forget their pencils, they quietly share their own. The praise comes easily. Such a helpful child, such a good student, and soon helpfulness becomes the safest role to play. At home, the pattern deepens. A sibling cries and they are the first to comfort. A parent sighs and they rush to lighten the load. They tidy the room without being asked, fetch water before anyone mentions thirst, sense the mood before words are spoken. Every small gesture is noticed, every act of service rewarded with approval. Little by little, kindness stops being a natural impulse and starts becoming a rule. If I give enough, I will be loved enough. Among friends, it looks the same. They are the one who shares snacks, who changes the game so no one feels left out, who agrees to play what others want even when their own desires remain hidden. Disagreement feels dangerous, so agreement becomes their language. They smile, they nod, They smooth the rough edges of conflict before it begins. And though no one asks them to carry so much, they carry it anyway, because carrying makes them visible. Carrying makes them safe. This is the soil where the mask of kindness first takes root, not in a single moment, but in countless small ones. The raised hand in class, the folded laundry at home, the soft voice among friends. To understand the adult who cannot say no, we must first meet this child, the endlessly kind child, the reliable child, the child who learned that goodness was the only guarantee of belonging. This is the good child, the one praised for patience, rewarded for obedience. They learned early that saying yes brings approval, while saying no risks rejection. Kindness became their role, not their choice. The good child is radiant in their small acts. They notice when someone drops a pencil and bend down to pick it up. They hear a sigh and fetch a glass of water without being asked. They soothe the crying sibling. They tidy the toys left scattered. They offer the bigger half of the sandwich to a friend. Their kindness is sincere, no calculation, no pretense. It is simply the way they know how to keep the world steady around them. Adults celebrate this goodness. Teachers praise their helpfulness. Parents boast of their maturity. Neighbors smile at their politeness. Such a sweet child, they say, and the child glows with the warmth of recognition. But what no one asks is how heavy it feels to always be sweet, how tiring it is to always be strong. For kindness, repeated without rest, can begin to feel less like freedom and more like duty. The shadow of the good child is subtle. They smile even when they are sad. They give even when their hands are empty. They listen even when their own heart is breaking. At first it looks like endless patience, but beneath it grows a quiet weariness, a loneliness wrapped in gentleness. Who notices when the helper needs help? Who comforts the comforter? Over time, the role hardens. The good child learns not only how to give, but also how to hide. They hide their anger because it might disappoint. They hide their tears because it might burden. They hide their desires because it might seem selfish. The gift of kindness becomes a mask of kindness, and behind that mask, the child whispers to themselves, "If I keep everyone else safe, maybe I will be safe too." The paradox is this: their goodness is real, but it costs them their voice. Their generosity is genuine, but it erases their needs. Their patience is admirable, but it leaves them unseen. What began as love slowly turns into survival. What began as innocence quietly becomes sacrifice. And this archetype does not vanish with age. The good child becomes the accommodating teenager, the dependable colleague, the selfless partner. Each role carries the same echo: be kind, be agreeable, be strong. But with every echo, the question grows louder: who am I when I am not performing kindness? This is the beauty and the mask of the good child. Their light shines brightly, but every light casts a shadow. To honor their kindness, we must also acknowledge its cost. And it is from here that we step into the realm of psychology to see how this pattern, once born in childhood, shapes the rest of a life. Psychologists like Dr. Johnny Swebb describe this as an attachment wound, when love feels conditional, tied to pleasing others. A child learns that approval comes not from simply being, but from behaving. Being quiet, being helpful, being endlessly good. And once this lesson is planted, it grows roots that follow them into every season of life. Carl Jung reminds us, every light casts a shadow, and kindness, when repeated without pause, carries that shadow too. What looks like patience can mask fear. What looks like generosity can mask exhaustion. What looks like sweetness can mask the terror of being abandoned. A smile may shine brightly, but behind it the jaw clenches. A yes may sound soft, but inside the heart trembles. To understand this paradox, we must look at the psychology of conditioning. Behaviorists call it reinforcement. When a child gives, they are rewarded with affection. When they resist, they are met with withdrawal. Over time, the nervous system learns the equation: kindness equals safety, resistance equals danger. And once the body encodes that truth, it no longer feels like choice. It feels like survival. Neuroscience adds another layer. The brain's mirror neurons, those circuits of empathy, light up when others are in pain. For the good child, these neurons do not simply flicker, they blaze. They feel the disappointment of a parent as if it were their own, the tension in a room as if it pressed directly on their chest. Hyper-attuned, hypersensitive, hyper-responsible. Their empathy is a gift, but also a burden, because it never knows when to stop. This is why psychologists speak of compassion fatigue, not just tiredness, but a deep depletion of the nervous system. Imagine carrying water in a cup with no time to refill. Eventually, the cup runs dry. Imagine holding a lamp without rest. Eventually, the flame consumes the wax. Compassion fatigue is not about lacking love. It is about love being drained faster than it can be replenished. And yet society often misreads this exhaustion. Teachers call them model students. Parents call them little adults. Colleagues later call them team players. They are admired for their reliability, their calm, their selflessness. But admiration does not equal recognition. Praise for the role can eclipse concern for the person. Who asks if the helper is hurting? Who wonders if the giver is empty? Jung's shadow reminds us that light without balance blinds more than it illuminates. Kindness without boundaries turns from virtue into mask, from connection into erasure. The shadow of kindness is not evil, but it is costly. It costs sleep, it costs joy, it costs the simple freedom to say no. And the wound of conditional love explains why this cost is so easily ignored. If love must be earned, then exhaustion feels normal. If safety must be purchased, then sacrifice feels natural. If belonging depends on pleasing, then silence feels safer than truth. But a life built on survival strategies cannot flourish. It can endure, but it cannot expand. So what happens when the good child grows up? The answer lies in the very patterns they carry forward. They overachieve to be valued. They people please to be accepted. They fear intimacy because closeness feels like risk. And slowly, the survival lessons of yesterday become the suffering of today. This is where psychology meets story, and where theory meets the heart. To see the roots of kindness as both beautiful and heavy is to finally honor the full picture. And from here we can turn toward the present moment, to trace how those childhood lessons echo in adult life, and to ask the deeper question: how does yesterday's mask continue to shape today's face? The child who stayed quiet becomes the adult who apologizes too much. The teenager who never complains becomes the colleague who takes on everyone's work. And slowly, kindness erases the self, leaving anxiety, burnout, and the loneliness of invisibility. This is how yesterday's lessons echo into today. What once felt like safety becomes a prison. The yes that once brought praise now drags chains of exhaustion. The smile that once kept the peace now hides the storm beneath, and the kindness that once won love now leaves the heart aching, unseen, and unsure if it was ever loved at all. Look closely at the patterns. The adult overcommits, saying yes to projects that stretch them thin, staying late while others go home, covering mistakes that are not theirs to fix. They apologize for speaking too long, for taking up space, even for existing too loudly. They nod along in meetings, they swallow their frustration in arguments. They soften their words until their voice disappears. On the surface, they look dependable. Inside, they are unraveling. The body begins to tell the story, the mouth refuses to speak. Sleep grows shallow, the shoulders tense, the chest tightens as if bracing for impact. The mind never rests, always rehearsing, always scanning for the next demand. Anxiety creeps in like an uninvited guest. Depression follows like the shadow that refuses to leave. Burnout smolders like embers that never cool. The cost of kindness without boundaries is not just emotional, it is physical, lived in every cell of the body. And yet society keeps applauding. She's such a team player. He never says no. They're always so kind. Admiration pours in, but recognition does not. Who notices the tears shed in silence? Who hears the heartbeat that races with fear at the thought of letting someone down? Who sees the weight carried behind the steady smile? Praise for the role blinds us to the suffering of the person. There is also the invisible ache of relationships. The good child grown into the good partner struggles with intimacy. They fear conflict, so they agree too quickly. They fear abandonment, so they cling too tightly. They fear rejection, so they overgive, hoping love can be secured by sacrifice. But love built on fear is fragile. It bends, it breaks, it leaves both people wondering why closeness feels so distant. Friendships too are touched by the mask. They are the one who remembers birthdays, who shows up with soup when someone is sick, who listens for hours without speaking of their own pain. And while these acts are real and generous, they are rarely reciprocated. Over time, resentment brews quietly. Why does no one show up for me the way I show up for them? But the resentment rarely escapes their lips. Instead, it coils inside, another weight, another silence. This is the paradox of invisibility. The kinder they are, the more unseen they become. Their reliability turns them into furniture, always present, rarely noticed. Their patience makes others assume they never struggle. Their generosity convinces the world they have no needs. And the longer this continues, the louder the question inside. Do they love me? Or do they love what I give them? And do they live what I give them? Kindness, when it becomes identity, erases individuality. What began as a gift becomes a performance. What began as connection becomes erasure. And slowly, the mask tightens. It does not fall off when they leave childhood. It follows them into boardrooms, bedrooms, friendships, families. Everywhere the mask smiles. Everywhere the mask says yes. Everywhere the mask hides the self. This is not to say that kindness itself is false. The good child's heart was sincere. The adult's love is real. But when kindness is demanded, when it is drained without replenishment, when it becomes the only acceptable face to show, it stops being a gift. It becomes survival. And survival, though powerful, is not the same as living. So we've returned to the deeper truth. Yesterday's lessons do not stay in yesterday. They echo, they repeat. They shape today's exhaustion, today's anxiety, today's invisibility. And unless they are seen, unless they are named, the cycle continues. Which leads us to the crucial shift, the moment when survival must give way to healing, when the mask must be lifted, when the good child must be taught a new language, the language of boundaries, of self-compassion, of honest love. You are not too weak or too nice. You were trained to survive this way. But survival is not the same as living. What protected you once now quietly drains you. What kept you safe as a child now keeps you small as an adult. To heal is not to throw away your kindness, but to root it again in truth rather than fear. The way forward is gentle. It does not begin with grand declarations or impossible transformations. It begins with pauses. Small, sacred pauses. Learn to pause before you say yes. Feel the breath in your chest, the weight in your body, the tug in your heart. Ask yourself, is this a true yes or a disguised no? That tiny moment of awareness is not hesitation. It is freedom taking its first breath. Boundaries are the next step, not walls, not weapons, but lines drawn with honesty. A boundary says, this is what I can offer, and this is where I must rest. It does not reject love, it protects it. It does not diminish kindness, it purifies it. Without boundaries, giving turns to resentment. With boundaries, giving becomes clean, chosen, sustainable. Boundaries are not selfish, they are sacred acts of balance. And then comes self-compassion, the art of treating yourself as gently as you treat others. For too long, your kindness has flowed outward, like a river feeding every shore except its own. Self-compassion is the turning of the river back toward its source. It is the reminder that your needs matter, your voice matters, your rest matters. To rest is not laziness. To say no is not betrayal. To honor your limits is not weakness. These are truths that rebuild the ground beneath your feet. Healing also means reparenting yourself, becoming the adult you once needed, the one who listens instead of silences, the one who comforts instead of criticizes. When the old voice inside whispers, "You are only loved when you give," you answer with a new voice, "I am loved because I exist." When the body tenses at the thought of saying no, you soothe it like you would a frightened child, reminding it that safety no longer depends on erasure. And yes, there will be resistance. Old patterns cling tightly. Masks do not fall away in a single gesture. But every pause is a crack of light. Every boundary is a breath of freedom. Every act of self-compassion is a seed planted in soil that once only knew sacrifice. Slowly, what was survival transforms into choice. What was exhaustion transforms into truth. What was mask transforms into faith. Real kindness begins here, not in depletion, but in honesty. When you give from a place of fullness, your kindness carries weight. When you care without abandoning yourself, your compassion has clarity. When you love with boundaries intact, your love becomes stronger, steadier, more enduring. This is the paradox of healing. By protecting yourself, you make your presence more trustworthy to others. And so the path forward is not about becoming less kind, but about becoming truly kind. Kind to others, yes, but also kind to yourself. For if light is to shine without burning out, it must learn to rest. It must learn to breathe. It must learn to belong to itself first. This is the invitation of healing, to choose pauses over reflexes, to choose honesty over performance, to choose compassion that flows both outward and inward. And as we stand here on the threshold between survival and life, we begin to see what kindness was always meant to be. Not proof, not performance, but presence. And from this presence we arrive at a turning point, a truth worth carrying forward. Kindness without self-love is a mask, but kindness with self-love is freedom. Kindness is not self-erasure, it is truth. Your worth was never meant to be measured by how much you give. It doesn't rise with every yes or fall with every no. True kindness is not a mask you wear to keep love, nor a costume you put on to earn safety. It is the quiet strength of being honest, the steady light of showing up as you are. A candle does not apologize for the glow it offers, nor does it dim itself to prove its flame. In the same way, your kindness was never meant to burn you out. It was meant to warm, to illuminate, to connect. And here lies the shift. Kindness with self-love is freedom. Freedom to say yes with joy, to say no with clarity, to give without depletion. Freedom to be seen, not only for what you offer, but for who you are. This is the invitation to reclaim kindness as truth, to honor your worth beyond performance, and to carry both light and shadow with gentleness. And as we move forward, the question remains, what happens when you choose kindness, not as survival, but as your most authentic presence? If you recognize yourself in these words, share your story in the comments. Someone else might need to know they're not alone. Because healing does not happen in silence. Healing begins when one voice dares to speak, when one story touches another, when one hidden ache finds echo in a stranger's heart. What you carry may feel heavy, but when named, it becomes lighter. What you reveal may feel vulnerable, but when shared, it becomes connection. Your kindness has held others for so long, let it hold you now, through community, through resonance, through the courage of being seen. Share not for applause, but for truth. Share not for perfection, but for presence. Share not to prove, but simply to belong. Perhaps your words will be the light someone else has been waiting for. And perhaps, in giving voice to your own story, you will finally hear it yourself.